Let me be honest. I catch a lot of flack. People tell me all the time, there's no way what you're saying is true, or the stuff you're teaching is why kids these days are so messed up. And you know what? I get it. Some of the things I say might sound wild or even unbelievable. I don't always stop mid sentence to cite my sources or flash a study on the screen. But here's the thing, I'm never just making this stuff up. Everything I teach is rooted in research and evidence based strategies. Whether I mention the study or not, I'm always relying on what science shows works best for kids. That said, today I'm doing something a little different. I'm dedicating this episode to the research. I will be stopping to share specific studies and sources as we break down 5 common myths about raising and nurturing kids. We'll look at where each myth comes from and dive into what the science actually says. My goal today isn't just to teach you, it's to show that there's real science behind these strategies and to give you the tools you need to support kids with confidence. Hey there, I'm Stuart Perry, but most people know me as Mr. Stu. I'm a licensed clinical social worker, a child therapist, and an autism spectrum disorder clinical specialist. Here on Bad Kids Don't Exist, I help adults better understand kids so kids and their caregivers can thrive. By the end of today's episode, you'll have the research-backed truth to navigate some tricky topics with confidence. Before we dive in, make sure to like this video and subscribe to the channel so you don't miss future episodes. Let's get to it. And we'll start with a myth I hear all the time. Don't worry, they'll grow out of it. But will kids really just grow out of difficulties they show when they're young? Before we jump all the way in, make sure to like this video and subscribe to help other people find these important insights. To get started, let's talk about where this idea of kids just growing out of things comes from. It really starts from an outdated belief that children will naturally outgrow developmental or behavioral challenges without any intervention whatsoever. And let me just say, before everybody panics or before everybody just writes in and tells me that kids do outgrow things, yes, they do outgrow some things. There are some things that are developmentally appropriate for a child to face, and those things will most likely just be resolved once the child furthers in their development. As a matter of fact, there's a resource on my website. If you go to badkidsdon'texist.com/resources, there's a document there that says typical versus atypical child development. In that document, I've broken down all these developmental milestones from birth through the teenage years, and it talks about what is typical and what's a typical version of a behavior, and then what is more atypical, what is not expected, and what may constitute an underlying issue, what may be an indicator that there's something more going on than just normal or typical development. So there are some things that will be resolved, and if you go download that resource, you can see some of the things that are most likely just going to be things that kids will grow out of, and then some other things that maybe needs some more professional support. In order to differentiate, let's just talk first about what constitutes a real problem. In mental health, there are 3 things that we track, and different people have different acronyms for this or different ways to keep track of these things. But there's really 3 things that we as mental health professionals are looking for. And it's the acronym FIT, F-I-T. It's the frequency, the intensity, and the time of behaviors. How often something happens, how extreme it is, and how long it lasts. When trying to decide if something is a real problem or just developmentally typical, those three things can be really important and really helpful to think about. Think about the frequency. How often is this thing happening? If it's happening at a high level of frequency, if it's happening a lot, especially if it's happening a lot even with intervention, it could be that the child is struggling with something deeper than just the behavior, and some professional intervention is necessary. The second letter, that I, is the intensity. If it is very extreme behavior, if it's very intense, or if it's very dangerous, either to themselves or to other people, it's likely that that behavior is not just a normal, typical childhood developmental issue. It does require some professional intervention. And then finally is the T, time. If that behavior is lasting for a extended period of time, if it is going on for hours, maybe it's a tantrum, and instead of just 20 minutes, it's going on for 4 hours and not decreasing in intensity that whole time, it could be something where the child needs more professional support. But many things have been pathologized that don't need to be pathologized. So go check out that document, that typical versus atypical development document, and see how your child's behaviors match up. If you see things that are more frequent, more intense, and last longer than what is listed in that document, it could be the child needs more professional support. And let's say they do meet that criteria, where this is an atypical developmental issue or an atypical behavioral problem. What then? Will children just outgrow those real difficulties? Now that we've distinguished between what is really just typical childhood development and what is atypical with that frequency, intensity, and time, if there is atypical development or atypical behavioral challenges, will a child just outgrow those things? Let's talk first about the long-term impact of not getting some intervention. A study from the Early Childhood Technical Assistance Center, it's also known as the ECTA Center or the ECTA Center, found that without early intervention with children who are facing these atypical developmental things, they are more likely to experience ongoing developmental delays. So it's not just that they'll be stunted in their development at that period of time, but that development will continue to be stunted even as they physically grow up. Their study also shows that without that early intervention, children are more likely to experience academic difficulties. So they'll fall behind in school more often. If they need intervention and it's not received, then they'll struggle at school. And finally, their study found that not intervening can lead to social emotional issues. I say all that to tell you, really, it affects every part of their life. Mental health is something that someone is living with at all times in all environments. So if they need some help with their mental health and they're not getting it, they don't leave their brain behind when they go to school. They don't leave their brain behind when they're at home. They don't leave their brain behind when they're with their friends. It's that same brain at all times, and not helping when a child needs some help will affect every domain of their life. If you look at this study by the ECTA Center, it's not just that they won't outgrow it, it's likely that these challenges will persist and can even morph into those more serious difficulties later in life. But let me also give you some hope, because sometimes one of the things that hold people back from getting their children intervention is this belief that once their child is in services or once their child starts therapy, that their child is going to need therapy forever and always. But that's not what the research shows either. A study by the Rand Corporation found that early intervention will actually reduce the need for future services. In most cases, if a child is dealing with something with their development and there's atypical development or atypical behavioral concerns and they get some professional help, it's unlikely that they will need services again in the future. That's both a great economic thing as well as a great thing to know that they will have built the skills and caught up so that they won't need those services. So just because a child goes into services does not mean they'll need to be in those services forever. And another study by the Rand Corporation found that early intervention actually improves cognitive and social development and leads to better academic outcomes. Remember all those things we talked about that a child would struggle with if they don't get early intervention? Well, this study by the Rand Corporation shows that with early intervention, all those things are resolved. Really, what I'm saying is you've got nothing to lose. The early intervention is most likely to lead to more positive outcomes as the child develops. If you have a concern, if you feel like your child is showing some things in their development that are just not typical, or they're showing some struggles that are lasting with persistent frequency and high intensity and extended periods of time, don't wait to get some help. Go to badkidsdon'texist.com/resources, download that sheet and see if there are any things that your child is demonstrating that may mean they have an underlying issue that needs some professional help. And then consult with a professional to explore some early intervention options. That will help make sure the problem doesn't grow into more serious concerns later, and it will set your child up for success. If you found this helpful, be sure to like this video and subscribe for even more insights. Next, let's tackle the myth of perfect parenting. Good parents never lose their cool. Spoiler alert, that's not true. And here's why. But before we break it down, don't forget to like this video and subscribe so more people can discover these truths. This myth that good parents never lose their cool really comes from a lot of societal pressure and idealized portrayals of parenting, both on television shows and in movies and on social media. And all of those portrayals have promoted this false idea that good parents are always calm and composed. And there's the flip side of that too, where if a parent loses their cool and it's posted on social media, or loses their cool in a TV show or a video, they are the villain or they are the stupid one. And all of that has built up this pressure for parents to feel like they have to be perfect. But let me tell you what the research really says. First and foremost, perfection just isn't attainable. And there's lots of research that shows that. But a specific study from the American Psychological Association actually found that striving for parental perfection can create pressure and anxiety within the family. It's not just that it stresses out the parent, it can actually affect the family dynamic. It shows that this perfectionism is linked to negative effects on family dynamics. So it's, again, not just that someone will feel stress or feel anxiety or have more stress or pressure or anxiety. It actually causes disruption in the way family members interact with each other when parents are striving for total perfection. This study by the American Psychological Association actually found that recognizing and accepting imperfections can lead to healthier relationships between parents and their children and better well-being for both the parents and the children. Think about it like this. Children learn through what you model. If you show that perfection is the only way to be, it will not only stress you out, it will stress them out, and it will lead them to be too concerned with things that they don't find absolutely perfect about themselves. When you model that perfection is the only way to be, your child will then believe that perfection is the only way to be. Kids learn by what they see from you. And speaking of that modeling, according to a study published in the Society for Research in Child Development's journal, which is called Child Development Perspectives, this study was published in 2007, parents significantly influence their children's ability to regulate their emotions. And the way that they found that parents affect children's ability to regulate their emotions is that children observe and then emulate how parents manage their own emotions. What that means is that if children never see you have a difficult emotion and handle it, they won't know how to handle it themselves. And if they never see you deal with a mistake, they won't know how to handle mistakes themselves. I was recently in an IEP meeting. That IEP stands for Individualized Education Plan. It was with some school staff, and we were talking about ways that a child can learn to calm themselves. And I was asking the teacher about different things that they do in the classroom, and I was blown away to hear this teacher tell me a story about when she was up at the board and she was writing and she was working on something and children kept talking and she was just becoming more and more frustrated, and she noticed she was becoming more and more frustrated, and she turned around to the class and she looked at them and she said, "Hold on, everybody." And she has an assistant who works with her, and she said, "My assistant is gonna watch you all for the next few minutes. I just need about 5 minutes. I'm going to go use our calm down corner because I feel myself getting upset. So I need just a few minutes. I'll be right back, but I need just a few minutes. I'm going to go use the calm down corner." I cannot tell you how much I praised that teacher for not just trying to fight through it and not pretending like nothing was going on and not becoming frustrated even more so and then lashing out, but taking a moment to show children, I am feeling a difficult emotion. Here's how I'm going to deal with it. You can deal with it that way too. That is a beautiful, amazing story that I will hold with me forever. And so will the kids in that classroom. And they know now that it's not stupid to use the calm down corner. It doesn't make you bad to use the calm down corner. That using the calm down corner is an effective way to stay in control of yourself. Kids learn through what we model. The American Psychological Association also has posted many studies, but one in particular that showed that repairing conflict will actually strengthen parent-child relationships. That when there's a break or when there's a rift or when a parent has made a mistake or when a child has made a mistake, when there's a mess up, the way that you show how to repair the relationship with your child through apologizing, and making amends teaches them that relationships are not over just because of conflict. And that's one thing that in our world today is not very prevalent. And we need to increase the prevalence of that understanding that just because there's conflict does not necessarily mean that a relationship needs to be over. And it shows children that your bond is strong enough to withstand some difficulties. Here's really what all that comes down to. Perfection is not the goal. You don't have to be perfect. And let me tell you right here, right now, you are exactly the parent your child needs. With all your imperfections, with all your struggles, with all your difficulties, with everything that's going on, with all the ways you feel like you are less than and messed up, you are exactly the parent your child needs. It doesn't mean you don't have room to grow. It doesn't mean there's not things that you should be working on, but you are the parent your child needs. And striving for perfection will actually create more difficulties than it does benefits. When you mess up, and you will mess up time and time again, but when you mess up, acknowledge that you've lost your cool. Apologize and discuss with your child how to handle similar situations better in the future. You can know that in doing so, your imperfections are exactly what your child needs to see. If this resonates with you, make sure to like and subscribe to stay updated on more videos like this one. Now, let's tackle one of the most debated myths. Spanking teaches respect. Let's look at what the research actually says about physical discipline. But before we dive in, be sure to like this video and subscribe to help spread research-backed parenting strategies. I can tell you, this is the thing that I talk about the most often that people dislike the most when I speak about it. And they tell me that I'm misinformed, that I have no idea what I'm talking about, and that because I talk about spanking and I say it's ineffective, that I must be the reason why, quote, kids these days are, quote, so terrible. But let me tell you about where this myth comes from, and then let me tell you about what the research actually says. Does spanking teach respect? This myth is often linked to some cultural or religious traditions and beliefs, and different cultures have different versions of this, and different religions have different versions of this. One of the most common ones is in the Christian Bible. There is a passage that has the words, spare the rod, spoil the child. It does not just explicitly say spare the rod, spoil the child. There are other words around those words. There are other meanings to those words, all those things. And if you'd like to know more about what that passage actually means, you can check out some other videos on my channel where I talk about spanking. But for now, let's look at what the research says about spanking and if it does indeed build more respect in children. Here's what the research says. According to a study in the Journal of Family Psychology, spanking is actually correlated with increased behavioral problems. Can you believe it? I can. But this study in the Journal of Family Psychology shows that spanking is correlated with increased behavioral problems. Their study shows that spanking is linked to an increase in aggression, antisocial behavior, and mental health issues. Basically, what they found is when you spank a child just sees it as you hitting them because you're angry. And no matter how you preface it, that's how a child sees it. They see it as mommy or daddy or whoever parent is hitting me because they're angry with me. And what that teaches them is that when the child gets angry enough, it's okay to hit other people. That leads to increased aggression. It also teaches them that others may also get frustrated and want to hit them. And when that happens, they just need to accept it, that that's okay. That leads to some of that antisocial behavior, either not wanting to be around people, rejecting people, or doing everything to push people away because it feels dangerous. And finally, it tells them that when someone hits you and then says that they love you, that's acceptable. For so many reasons, that is wrong, and it leads to lots of different mental health issues because it breaks what's called secure attachment. The secure attachment is how children really form their first relationships with their caregivers, and having that secure attachment helps them to build attachment and relationship with others in the future. With that mismatched thought of someone has hit me and said they love me, it makes it really difficult for children to form positive relationships, both with their caregivers and with others in the future. Another study showed some impact on brain development. This study was done by some researchers at Harvard, and they found that spanking can alter brain responses in children's brains, including an increased perception of threats. And I'll get into a little bit about what that means, but let me tell you just some about the study, and then I'll tell you what that study found. This study involved 147 children who were between about 10 and 11 years old who underwent functional MRI scans. And while the children were in the functional MRI, the researchers showed them different faces of actors. Some of the faces were fearful faces or faces of aggression, and then some of the faces were neutral facial expressions. When the children were presented with the more fear-inducing faces, the children who were spanked exhibited an increased activity in areas of the brain that are associated with threat detection and emotional regulation. So threat detection and emotional regulation, more activity going off. At first, that might sound like a great thing. And as I was reading it, I was like, oh my goodness, wait, an increase in emotional regulation, that increased brain activity. But this is not a great thing. That hyperactivation actually makes children more emotionally reactive, not regulated, but more emotionally reactive and less able to regulate their emotions because their brain is constantly on high alert. Which basically means that instead of fostering self-control, spanking conditions children to struggle with emotional regulation, which makes it harder for them to calm down and process their emotions effectively, and it conditions them to overreact more to minor stressors, meaning that increased activity in the threat detection area would mean that when children see something that is either not a threat or a very small threat, they would either perceive it as a threat when there's no threat at all, or a large threat when it's a very small threat. It also showed, this study by the APA also showed that spanking may predispose children to increased anxiety, depression, and behavioral problems, as that heightened perception of threats can affect their emotional regulation and social interactions. Basically, the study breaks it down to say if you are spanking children, don't expect to spank them less. Spanking them actually is perpetuating this cycle of disruptive behavior. And if spanking is your go-to, then you'll actually end up spanking children more and more frequently the more you spank them. It also has just been demonstrated overall to not teach respect. The American Psychological Association also published an article that busts this big misconception about physical discipline. A lot of people believe it's an effective way to stop bad behaviors or get kids to comply with what parents want. But here's the truth of that article. It reported there's no There is zero consistent scientific evidence that spanking or any form of physical discipline is likely to make kids stop unwanted behaviors or start doing the things that we want them to do, even in the short term. This research shows that physical discipline isn't better than other methods for getting positive outcomes. In fact, it often does the opposite. That same APA article reported studies have found that spanking actually predicts an increase in behavior problems over time, even after accounting for things like race and gender and socioeconomic status, which is something I hear all the time. It's, Stu, you don't know our culture, or you don't know how we raise our kids in this neighborhood, or whatever it might be. But even when all of those things are accounted for, spanking is actually shown to increase behavioral problems over time. Not only is it not helpful, it can make things worse. Spanking teaches disrespect much more than it teaches respect. Use positive discipline strategies, like even something as simple as setting clear expectations. I'm constantly baffled how few times parents just have conversations with their children about what is expected, why it's important, or just talking with them when they make a mistake. There's not even always a punishment that's necessary. And reinforce good behavior. Many times we make a huge deal out of things when children make a mistake, mess up, or make a choice that we disagree with, and then we just say nothing at all when they do the right thing or what we were wanting them to do. Reinforce that good behavior with praise and even reward sometimes. And when punishments are necessary, avoid the physical discipline. Avoid it and find other strategies that will actually be of benefit to your child. If you are learning something new today, don't forget to like this video and subscribe for more research-backed strategies to support kids. Let's move on to another myth. If you praise too much, kids will get lazy. But does praise really lead to entitlement or a lack of effort? Before we unpack this, make sure to like this video and subscribe so others can benefit from these insights. This myth of praising kids leading to laziness comes from the world of education. And the research I'm going to give here in this video is more about professionals working with children rather than parents talking to their own kids. If you, as a parent with your own children, want some information on giving praise as a biological parent or an adopted parent or whatever kind of parent you are, you can check out some other videos I have on my channel about specific praise for being and praise for doing. Just type that in, type Mr. Stu praise, and you'll find different videos about me explaining to parents of biological children or adopted children in their family, how they can give that praise effectively. That said, there are some things we can all learn from giving kids the quote, right, end quote, types of praise. This thought that more praise leads to laziness is mostly untrue, but research has found that excessive praise can lead to some difficulties. There was some research done by a fascinating woman named Carol Dweck, who is a psychology professor at the Stanford Graduate School of Education. And her research found that excessive praise can cause children, get this, it can cause children to have panic, anxiety, become risk averse, and have what she's deemed a fixed mindset, which is the opposite of a growth mindset, meaning they don't believe they can get better. They believe that where they are is fixed. There is no growth potential. It's just fixed. It can also lead to what she termed praise addiction, where children only achieve to receive your praise rather than for their enjoyment of a task or for how it can benefit themselves, rather than just trying to make other people proud of them or happy with them. And again, this research is mostly focused on educators and professionals working with children, but it has some inclinations for parents of children within their family as well, because this excessive praise is defined. It's not just giving kids more praise, it's giving them more of the wrong kind of praise. The praise that leads to those difficulties of panic and anxiety and that fixed mindset is praise that has a few characteristics. First, it's only centered on the outcome. And this is one that I see often, even from professionals working with kids. But something like saying a child's artwork is beautiful at the end, when a child holds it up and says, "What do you think?" And you say, "Oh, it's beautiful." Doing that too often can actually cause children to have some panic and anxiety, because they want to constantly achieve that rather than just feeling proud of it themselves. They want you to say that it's good. Another quality of that wrong kind of praise is praise that's not about nondescript qualities of a person. Like it doesn't have any description to it or any definition to it whatsoever. And it's not something that a child chose. It's just something that is a quality. It would be something like saying, "You're just so amazing." Now, again, parents with your children at home, there are times where it's great to just say, "You are amazing," and "You are all these incredible things." That's one thing. But doing that too much actually tells the child that they have no control over being amazing. That, and it's a bit messy here, but that their understanding is that they have zero input on their life. They have zero control over positive outcomes or negative outcomes. It's just kind of whatever they were born into. So giving too much of that nondescript qualities of a person praise can cause children to really panic about how much control they have over their lives. And a final quality of this quote unquote wrong type of praise is praise that's comparative. Like a teacher praising a child for outdoing their peers, when really that child is at a developmentally typical level. They just kind of formed a skill faster than some others. Maybe it's expected that all the kids in the class are going to learn this skill. If you tell a child that they are special for having learned this skill that everybody is then going to learn, it can really cause some chaos in their mind. But Carol Dweck's research also shows that there is some other praise that's linked to positive outcomes. And when that praise is used successfully, it can build confidence, it can build engagement, and it can offset some behavioral challenges. That type of praise, luckily, is also defined by her research. And there's really 4 parts to it. The first one is to praise the process, not just the outcome. I gave the example of just saying like, "Oh, that artwork is so beautiful," or "That artwork is so good." Well, that is all about the outcome. It's all about the end result. But you can praise them for the process. You can give kids credit for effort, and even just for how much you see they're enjoying something. So instead of just saying that artwork is so good, you can say, "I can tell you worked hard on that," or "I can tell you really love to paint. I can tell that you really love your art." Do you see how those are different? One is about the end result and telling a child that the end result is the only thing that mattered. The other is saying, "Wow, you worked really hard on that. That is what I'm proud of you for. Whether or not it turns out perfect, I'm just proud of how much effort you put into it. Or I love how much, I see how much you love to paint. That tells them that whether or not it turns out well, if you just enjoy doing it, there are some things in life that are just worth doing because you enjoy them. So that first part is about praising the process, not just the outcome. The second quality of this effective praise is to be measured in your praise. Don't give fake praise or superfluous praise. Be specific. And know that you don't have to praise every single breath your child takes. Instead of just saying, that is the cleanest room I've ever seen in my life, which a child will see right through, and it will cause them some anxiety because it's like, well, if they're lying to me about this one, they're going to lie to me about some other ones. Rather than saying that, you can say, the way you organized your closet is going to be helpful when you're choosing your clothes for the day. Do you see how one is very specific and one is very real and it's very applicable and it's very important for the child to realize why their hard work has paid off? The other one is too far and it's fake. That is the cleanest room I've ever seen in my life, is not something that tells a child what they did correctly. But when you can say the way you organized your closet is going to be helpful when you're choosing your clothes for the day, it tells them that they have done something that is going to be of benefit for them. So be measured in that praise and don't give any fake praise. Give some specific praise. And you also want to avoid comparative praise. That's the third quality of this effective praise. Avoid comparative praise, like you did that so much better than them. That sets the child up to feel like they're only worthwhile when they're outperforming other people. And then the final quality is, especially for professionals working with children, to use praise as description rather than as something the child has earned from you. An example of this is like when a child is painting in my office, for instance, I will comment on what they're doing and I'll do it with enthusiasm, but I'm really just describing what they're doing. I'll say something like, "Ooh, you chose to paint the sun blue." Or, "I see you added some arms and legs on the person." Do you see? I'm excited with them, but I'm really just describing what they're doing. And that helps them find their own joy in the process and see that I'm with them on it, but I'm really just describing what's going on. People have heard me explain this before, and they kind of say it's like when Dwight Schrute in The Office just says, it posts up the paper that says, "It is your birthday." It's not so much like that. I wouldn't just look at them and say, "It is your birthday." I would say, "Ah, it's your birthday." Do you see how that shows excitement? But I'm not saying you earned something from me. I'm just saying, it's your birthday. I see you chose to paint the sun blue. I'm noticing something that they put effort into, and I'm describing it so that they can see that they can get joy from their choices and their decisions. It's not earning my praise. I'm just describing and showing that I'm enthused alongside with them. Praise the process. Be measured and specific. Don't compare, and try to describe rather than state praise as the child having earned something from you. If you will do that, you'll be using effective praise, and that praise can motivate. Make sure to like this video and subscribe for more tips on working with kids in today's wild world. And finally, let's address the big one. The myth is screen time is always harmful. Let's explore how to strike a healthy balance. But before we get into the facts, take a second to like this video and subscribe so more people can learn how to navigate screen time with confidence. This myth that screen time is always negative has come out of many concerns over the rapid rise of technology and the rapid rise of technology use by children who are younger and younger and younger, and that potential negative impact on their development. Let's look and see what the research actually says. There's some studies that were done by the American Academy of Pediatrics that showed that it's really about quality over quantity. Their studies showed that high quality screen time, such as some educational apps, will actually support learning in children. There are some guidelines that were drawn up by the American Academy of Pediatrics. Basically, what it comes down to is the younger children are, the less they should be on technology. And their overall guidelines for children in elementary school is just that children are only looking at high quality content and that their free time on screens is limited to no more than 2 hours a day. There was some other research done that showed that in today's world, children are on screens an average of 7 hours every single day. That's just too much. And the research also shows that most of that time kids spend on technology is junk. It is just flooding their brain with all sorts of chemicals, and it does turn technology into a drug for children. But this study by the American Academy of Pediatrics showed that if you switch that, if you flip it and you find some high quality programming on YouTube for kids to watch, or if they are watching something or playing an educational game, or they're on some educational apps, and that time is limited. Again, even with that high quality programming, you don't want them on it all day long or for extended periods of time for several days in a row, but that those things can support their learning. It can make them more excited to learn, and it can help them learn things more quickly. But there's an important caveat to much of this technology use in children, and this is something that we have got to drive home with parents. We've got to talk more about parental involvement in children's technology use. And the main thing that I want to talk about here is what's called co-viewing, where a parent is actually sitting with their child and they are watching the programming with the child, or if the child is on an app and playing a game or whatever it might be, that a parent is there with them. There was some research done by Common Sense Media that showed that co-viewing content, that a parent watching with their child and engaging in the content with their child, will actually enhance comprehension of the content by the child, and it turns screen time into an interactive experience rather than one where the child completely just zones out and is in their own world for hours and hours and hours and then doesn't know how to interact with people. That co-viewing also ensures that your child is not exposed to anything that would be developmentally inappropriate for them. The algorithms on all of these apps are not designed to help your child learn more. They are designed to help your child become more dependent on staying in the app. It is designed to fuel their brain, and it is designed to keep them scrolling and keep them on their apps for longer and longer and longer. And sometimes what that algorithm can lead to, because your child will find it so interesting and because of the other things that your child has viewed, is it will lead them down a rabbit hole, and then they will be exposed to things and see things and hear about things that they are not developmentally prepared to see and hear about. That co-viewing is important for so many reasons. And if you will co-view with your child, you can turn technology technology use and screen time from a passive experience into an interactive experience and a social experience where you are building a relationship with your child. The Pediatrics Journal found that it's just important to moderate screen time, that it is important to limit it down to that no more than 2 hours. That doesn't mean get all the way to 2 hours every single day. And it doesn't mean that if you go to 3 hours that you're a terrible person or a terrible parent, but it does mean to really moderate it. And it's so important to balance that screen time with physical activity and family engagement. If you can moderate the screen time and limit it and balance it, those things, according to this article in the journal, are actually linked to healthy development. Children are going to be exposed to screens. To say that they should never be allowed on any screen at all is also setting them up for failure. Because then one day they will be exposed to a screen and they won't know how to manage it. But if you help them manage it when they're young, and you help them moderate and you help them balance it with other things, then as they grow, their brain will learn on its own through that repetition of your modeling. It will learn how it can moderate that screen time on its own and how it will balance that screen time on its own. So when it comes to screens, not everything is terrible, and your child is not going to be terrible or set up for failure because they watch things on YouTube. But it is important to set boundaries, prioritize that high quality content, and engage with your kids. Don't just use it as a babysitter. Engage with your kids, co-view with them during that screen time. If you have enjoyed this discussion, don't forget to like and subscribe. Don't forget to like and subscribe for more episodes on parenting with purpose. Today, we took a deep dive into 5 of the most common myths about raising and nurturing kids and uncovered what the research really says. Kids don't always just grow out of it. Early intervention can make all the difference in setting them up for success. We learned that good parents don't have to be perfect. It's about showing your kids how to handle mistakes and repair relationships. Then we saw that spanking doesn't teach respect. Instead, it fosters fear and makes emotional regulation even harder for kids. We found that praise doesn't lead to laziness, and as a matter of fact, when it's done right, it builds confidence, resilience, and even motivation. And finally, we saw that screen time isn't all bad. It's about the quality of the content and how we use that content and interact with our children that really matters. Many of these myths have been passed down for generations, and often with the best of intentions. But what we've learned today is that science offers a better path, one rooted in connection, understanding, and strategies that actually work to support kids. And that's what truly matters. Thanks so much for tuning in. If you found this helpful, make sure to like this video, subscribe to the channel, and share it with someone who could benefit from separating these myths from the facts. And if you're interested in bringing this kind of insight to your team or organization, I'd love to help. I offer keynotes and workshops that explore some practical, research-based strategies for understanding and supporting kids. You can visit badkidsdon'texist.com/booking to learn more. Until next time, this is Mr. Stu reminding you that some things exist, some things don't. Bad kids don't exist. Peace.